Salim was in a fluster when Stephen didn't move after he laid down. He ran over and assessed Stephen's condition, only to find that he'd passed out from exhaustion. A huge weight lifted from his shoulders. While Stephen was asleep, Salim checked every inch of the underground palace to pass the time. The carvings on the walls depicted magnificent scenes from ancient battlefields. The martial artists who'd been preserved within the stone statues were the main characters of the carvings. Salim's cultivation was inferior to Stephen's, but he was intelligent and bright. He recorded the martial arts displayed on the carvings to pass on to the Leviathan unit when he returned for them to analyze. Time was a blur in the dim underground palace. There were no clocks or windows. It was impossible to tell how much time had passed. At some point, Stephen woke up and consumed the medicinal pills he carried on his person. He circulated his inner energy to adjust his body's condition. "If you're done resting, get on with your training. There's not much time left." Stephen ignored Tristan. Training required a healthy balance of work and rest. Only an idiot went to the extremes. He strolled over to Salim. "What did you find?" "I've recorded the martial arts depicted on the carvings. It might be useful for the Leviathan unit's training." Tristan interjected from the side. His words were like a splash of cold water to Salim's efforts. "Ancient martial artists don't put much emphasis on their stance. They also rarely used weapons. The essence of martial arts is to never deviate from the basics. Coordination of the limbs and muscles is the key to achieving alternating angles and varying speeds. If you can see through their movements, parrying their blows or launching a counterattack will be much easier." Despite Tristan's questionable personality, his guidance was trustworthy. He had decades of experience fighting with ancient martial artists. The three of them had a heated discussion before Stephen agreed to the idea of winning the next spar without using any fancy martial arts techniques. He also selectively erased the stances he'd learned from the ancient martial artist to rely solely on his sight, coordination, and movements. Tristan took one of the gems from the lamp and stuffed it in Stephen's pocket before walking to the sidelines. Stephen threw him a puzzled look. What was going on? His silent question was answered when a statue cracked. A middle-aged man in coarse linen clothes climbed out of the broken stone. Stephen had already heard that the bodies of ancient martial artists were preserved inside the statues, but he was stunned when he saw the real thing. The corpse didn't have any signs of rotting. Even their clothes were intact. This was an effect of the aura left behind by a martial artist. "What are you daydreaming about?" Tristan yelled. "Get into position. You're a thief who stole his treasure. He won't go easy on you." Stephen gave him a dirty look. The old man was framing him. Another battle broke out on the spur of a moment. The preserved body of an ancient martial artist was like a weapon with mystifying abilities that had been upgraded countless times. His attacks were much more powerful than when he was a phantom. Outside the tower, Dr. Dalton had successfully implanted the AI chip into the captive's brain. He'd also reattached his severed arm. In the face of technology, willpower was insignificant. The Leviathan unit's leader bombarded the captive with an onslaught of questions, and he answered every single one. The Tribulation sect was located at the west of the Verglas Strait in the snowy plains. This territory belonged to the country of Scotty, but it was mostly an uninhabited region because of the high altitude, high latitude, low temperatures, and harsh climate. There were no usable natural resources. It was a barren land of ice and snow. The Tribulation sect spent thousands of years building a castle in the snowy plains. This later became their base. When Nor, Wes, and Aston caught wind of the intel, they crowded around the Leviathan unit's leader and volunteered to wipe out the Tribulation sect. "This is valuable information. We can't let it go to waste. The battle is unavoidable anyway. It'll happen sooner or later, so we should take the initiative. If we make preparations now, by the time Mr. Adams comes back, we'll be ready to head out and storm into their base." Stephen wasn't around, so the Leviathan unit's leader couldn't make the decision on his own. It was obvious that the three Guardians had accumulated resentment towards the man in black from their previous encounters. The man had slighted and threatened the Grand Palace Master, and they would not let him get away with it. The Leviathan unit's leader tried to talk them out of it. "We represent the Supreme Leader. We are the face of the country. We can't trespass on another country's territory without permission. And do you really think we can wipe out the Tribulation sect without anyone knowing? It'll be a destructive battle, and Scotty will definitely notice. He was more inclined to attract the Tribulation sect to their own territory. Skyreach Corporation's cultural media department had amassed mountains of ancient texts. It was almost time for them to throw out the bait. The ancient martial arts factions had also arrived in Annapolis. They were staying in a hotel close to the military. During their free time, they visited the injured internal member from the Spectre Cemetery to check on his recovery. The three Guardians were capable, but they were also a handful. The Leviathan unit's leader couldn't help but wonder how Stephen kept them in check by himself. He thought quickly and changed the topic to Kim. As you know, Mr. Adams' wife has been using her connections to purchase books around the world. She's been making quite a few public appearances. The Tribulation sect plots in the dark. Who knows when they'll target her? Norwes and Aston exchanged glances. The Leviathan unit's leader was right. There had been multiple occasions in the past where their enemies had targeted Stephen's family because he was too difficult to deal with. They couldn't let anything happen to Kim or Valeria. The palace was overseeing their safety, but they would be more at ease if they personally kept an eye on them. Peace and quiet returned to the office as the three Guardians filed out of the room. With that hurdle out of the way, the Leviathan unit's leader grabbed his coat and headed out to visit the ancient martial arts factions. On the way there, he contemplated how to break the ice. The hotel was luxurious and extravagant, but the ancient factions weren't swayed. Withstanding mortal temptations was the key to progressing in their cultivation. When they heard that a distinguished guest was here to visit them, the elders and their students came out to welcome him. "We're honored you took the time out of your busy schedule to pay us a visit." The Leviathan unit's leader smiled and replied politely, "Not at all. It's my pleasure." They took their seats, and the waiter brought them the finest tea and snacks. He closed the curtains and closed the door behind him, leaving them alone in the conference room. It was time for them to talk business. The elder from the Bloodfiend Valley was the first to speak. "Is Mr. Adams on a business trip? Has there been a change of plans?" "That's not the case. He found a place to cultivate for a few days, that's all. He'll be back soon, new and improved." The elders were skeptical. Can he really improve in a few short days? For a martial artist at his realm, it wouldn't be strange if he made no progress for the next century or so. The Leviathan unit's leader didn't delve into the details. Stephen was a martial arts genius, and he was capable of achieving the impossible. After some small talk, the leader changed the topic to the external members of the ancient factions. They usually managed more than one business to provide financial support and resources for the faction's development. It would be beneficial for both sides to form a business partnership. "I don't know what business your factions are involved in, but Mr. Adams has a talent for making money. What do you think of a collaboration?" The elders laughed in amusement. Compared to Stephen's wealth, their businesses didn't amount to even a drop in the ocean. "There's nothing special about our businesses. Our external members opened up martial arts dojos and high-end fitness centers. Every faction has their own chain, but we don't make that much money from it." The leader took 1 minute to come up with a business proposal. "Whether it's your internal or external members, I believe that undergoing any form of martial arts training with your factions sets them apart from typical martial artists. Their talents will be wasted if they're not being put into use. We could establish a security company together. Your factions will have a hand in protecting the civilians, earn more profits, and increase your members' experience." The leader brilliantly weaved a few words of subtle flattery into his proposal. Aside from leading a prominent organization of the country, he had numerous talents, and one of them was the art of business. The elders had never considered starting a security company before, because they were mostly independent from society. "What kind of security company do you have in mind? Are you talking about guarding buildings or people? There's a big difference. How exactly will this business work?" Everyone at the table spoke at once. Although they were isolated from civilization, the value of money was universal. The process of cultivation required costly herbs and raw materials for the refinement of medicinal pills. Generally speaking, those who can afford to hire elite bodyguards will already have skilled martial artists by their side. However, they will need extra protection in certain places. One mission can take several days at a time, and a 7-figure reward is quite common. The elders and their students were astonished. Their faction's businesses were nowhere near as profitable. They never imagined that making money could be this easy. It's a righteous cause. There's no reason for us to refuse. We'll provide the manpower. Please give us your guidance in the technical aspects. Of course, it's no problem. We're on the same side after all. The rest of the discussion went smoothly. The Leviathan unit's leader successfully accomplished his goal of leaving a good impression on the ancient factions and establishing a business partnership. As the days passed, Stephen's harsh training in the underground palace was coming to an end. He and Salim were at their limits. Relying on medicinal pills to recover had given them more pain afterwards when they engaged in another fierce spar. Struggling at the brink of death had indeed increased their cultivation. Stephen had reached the intermediate stages of the immortal realm, and his foundation was solid. You two should be grateful to me. Don't even think about settling the score with me later. Remember, I did you a favor. Stephen and Salim smiled, but it didn't reach their eyes. Mr. Tristan, why would you say that? We came this far because of your careful guidance. When we have time to spare, we promise we'll give you a proper gift in return. We'll repay this favor in full. Their promise gave Tristan an ominous feeling. His training was inhumane even by his standards. The whirlpool of light appeared at the center of the room. It was their long-awaited exit out of this godforsaken place. When Stephen went home, the first thing he did was catch up with Kim and Valeria. Then he spent the rest of the morning lazing on the couch. After days of harsh training, he deserved this rare moment of relaxation. Kim came over with an apologetic look on her face. Those martial artists are reading as fast as they can, but at this rate, it might take over 100 years for them to finish. Is this going to affect your work? Maybe there's important information recorded in the text, but we just haven't gotten around to it yet. Spending money was easy, but reading and processing the information was much harder. It'll be okay. You don't have to feel pressured. We're using the books to generate hype. It's much more than enough as a trap. But from what you told me, the man in black has been in the country for a while. He has a lot more information than we do. If we announce we found one of the books out of the blue, he won't believe it. Stephen hadn't had the chance to finalize the trap with Tristan. After a few days of dishing out grueling training, Tristan had gone back to the training grounds to eat, drink, and relax. The man in black had most likely returned to his base in the snowy plains. It was a long journey from the U.S. They still had some time to prepare. Stephen recalled that while he was busy with work, Harry and Rebecca's company had made their headlines more than once. The reporters had also conducted an interview with DeAndre. Their business was a success shortly after its establishment, and a member of the Fallon family had even invested in the company. Kim didn't know much about the Cerulean Shipping Company. Harry and Rebecca tried to rope me in at first, but they don't seem that interested anymore. Recently, they offered to transport the books my company bought because there was too much to handle on our own. That's all I know. Ever since Kim left the Cassidy family with Stephen, she rarely saw Harry and Rebecca. If it wasn't necessary, she preferred to stay away from them. It didn't sound like Harry and Rebecca were up to no good, but Stephen had seen the local news. The two of them had taken over some of the construction projects at the industrial park to the north of the eastern port. They'd also reached an agreement with Silver Shield Corporation. That in itself was suspicious, because under normal circumstances, a shipping company wouldn't be worth Silver Shield Corporation's time. Stephen had nothing better to do today, so he decided to take a stroll around the eastern port. He and Kim had a light lunch before heading out. Harry and Rebecca sat in their office, admiring the view of the ocean. They were in a good mood. The factory's construction had begun, and they'd sent their managers to supervise and ensure the quality. Tina was generous. Even if they didn't contribute the materials, they would receive a considerable cut of the profits. Harry reviewed the company's performance report with a cigarette in his mouth. He was satisfied with the numbers. Our company's profits will double after this many orders. Rebecca was sitting next to him, eyes glued to her laptop and splurging on designer goods. "I heard Dr. Dalton's team is back in Annapolis," Harry said. "When are we going to start our investigation on his family?" Rebecca rolled her eyes. "Can you use your brain to think for once? Annapolis is the military's territory. We're ordinary people with no affiliation to the military. There's not much we can do except think of something else." Tina had put pressure on them from time to time to speed up the investigation. They absolutely couldn't afford to slack off. Harry was getting irritated by Tina's reminders. "We could just give them fake information. Then we'll collect evidence of their illegal activities in the country and report it to Stephen. It'll be a great contribution, don't you think?" Rebecca shot down his terrible idea. "What makes you think we can find incriminating evidence against them when our own country's intelligence network hasn't found anything? If Stephen approved of Silver Shield Corporation's intentions, he would have collaborated with them already instead of giving them a piece of land to buy a factory. Silver Shield Corporation specializes in manufacturing firearms and equipment. If we try and fool them, our lives will be over." The two of them lapsed into silence. Money was not that easy to earn. If they couldn't give Tina the information she wanted, they would have to cough up the money they'd pocketed. An employee hurried into the office to inform them that the Sovereign was here for an inspection. Harry and Rebecca sat up with a start. They took the elevator down to the lobby and ran outside to wait for him. A custom-made bulletproof car pulled up to the entrance. Kim and Stephen stepped out surrounded by bodyguards. Harry and Rebecca greeted them with a smile. "Kim, Mr. Adams, it's good to see you," Harry said. "Is there anything you'd like us to take care of?" "Would you like an update on maritime trade?" Rebecca asked. Stephen gestured in the direction of the port. "Show me your ships. I heard your business is doing well. Some transactions aren't convenient for the officials. In the future, they might decide to leave it to you." Harry and Rebecca's smiles widened. Stephen had many business families under his command. He had experience in keeping them satisfied with their cooperation. It would be better for him to appease Harry and Rebecca before they caused trouble for him. The sea breeze at the port was salty and damp. The crew was busy, rushing here and there to deal with goods entering and exiting the port. In the eastern port, Cerulean Shipping Company's cargo and transport ships were ranked in the top 5. Stephen identified them from the logo on the hull. "Silver Shield Corporation's your biggest customer. What goods are they shipping into the country?" "Their factory is in the initial phase of construction," Harry replied. "They haven't carried out any overseas trade." Stephen was aware of this. What he wanted to know was Silver Shield Corporation's future business plan. "Just because they haven't started doesn't mean they haven't made plans. You're their business partner. You should have discussed this before working with them." "The outline for the factory is complete, and they've decided on the materials," Rebecca added. "When it's constructed, they'll be establishing production lines and sending over a team for inspection." Tina and Kate had to invest in a considerable amount of manpower and resources to make Stephen believe that they were sincere in doing business with the country. If he was suspicious, he would keep monitoring them, which would get in the way of their investigation. Stephen carried out a brief inspection. There were no problems, so he let Harry and Rebecca leave to go do their own work. Shortly afterwards, the officer in charge of customs at the eastern port went to meet Stephen and Kim. Aside from military affairs, he handled most of the work at the port. "Mr. Adams, would you like me to take you to the office to handle official business?" "No, we don't need to go all the way there. I'm just here for a simple chat. Cerulean Shipping Company was established without notice, and it developed quickly. It should have affected the balance of commercial power at the port. How are the other companies taking this?" Stephen didn't completely believe what Harry and Rebecca told them. He had to confirm their words. The customs officer had a good impression of Harry and Rebecca's business. International organizations had been working together to suppress the United States' overseas trade, but their company was favored. Regardless of the reason, the success of their business had pulled up the economy. Based on the quantity and value of the goods imported and exported, Cerulean Shipping Company has occupied 20% of the market share, and it's steadily rising. The other companies have always been competing with each other. They don't have anything good to say about their new competitor. Your job is to oversee and regulate maritime trade, Stephen said. You can't let Cerulean Shipping Company have a monopoly. Helping the country with foreign capital isn't a charitable business. Who knows? They might end up causing trouble eventually. The customs officer realized his mistake and rushed to agree. While they were engrossed in discussion, large transport ships docked at the port. The containers on board were packed with ancient texts that had been recently purchased. Outsiders didn't have the courage to complain about Kim's wasteful spending. They treated her actions as enthusiasm toward developing the country's cultural industry. A truck with the logo of the military was passing through nearby. It didn't stop as it drove out of the port area. Crates of plutonium were inside. To avoid being followed, the submarine at the Verglas Strait had dropped Stephen and his team off before sailing back to the ocean. It was late in the afternoon when Stephen finished his inspection at the eastern port. There was still time, so he decided to stop by the industrial park to the north. Their car stopped at the public parking lot on the road half a mile from the industrial area. As Stephen made his way over with Kim, he spotted the senior executives of Silver Shield Corporation. They were also here to check on the construction's progress. Stephen and Kim walked into the construction site with their bodyguards. As they passed, the workers stopped what they were doing and turned to stare. Whether it was manual labor or operating the machinery, they weren't worried about bothering the sovereign. Is the industrial park to your standards? Stephen asked. Tina nodded. It's more than enough. We won't let you down. We'll forge excellent products to support your military. That's good to hear. Let's speed up the project then. I can't wait for the results. Stephen's lack of shame made the senior executives feel awkward. A large project like this should have received the local bank's approval for at least a $100 million loan. However, according to the negotiators who represented Stephen, the U.S. didn't have sufficient funds to invest in the project, so they'd have to rely on overseas capital. This was a test for Silver Shield Corporation. If they had ulterior motives, then the project was a pretense. Wasting that much money would not be worth it, and the project would be left unfinished. Of course, Tina and the other senior executives couldn't expose themselves, so they had to accept their terms. Stephen looked around the construction site. His gaze fell on a group of people standing nearby. What are they responsible for? Measurements, quality inspection, logistics, security, and more, Tina said. They do everything except manual labor. Stephen committed their faces to memory. He sensed a vague aura coming from them. This was a sign that they were martial artists, and they were trying to hide it. Was Silver Shield Corporation here to do business or to cause trouble? Stephen was on his way home with Kim when his phone rang.
Mr. Adams, there's been an accident with a military transport ship that usually sails back and forth between the eastern port and Mirage Island.
What happened? Did it sink or did it explode?
A large sea creature of unknown species attacked and damaged the ship. It fled when the ship's firepower defense system activated.
Stephen acknowledged the report and hung up. The area around Mirage Island was heavily guarded. It was unusual for someone to target the island, and it was even less likely for a creature in the sea to attack the ships. Moreover, the waters were usually calm and peaceful, especially in the main fishery area. When did the creatures in the sea become so aggressive? The officers responsible for maritime defense gathered in the meeting room and analyzed the information with solemn expressions. The military had pictures and videos of a damaged ship drifting over the ocean, waiting for rescue. When Stephen arrived after taking Kim home, he joined the officers at the table. What's the situation? The officers replayed the video. It's a mutated octopus. Its tentacles are longer than 100 feet. Its speed and aggression are unnatural. On the screen, a giant octopus was clinging to the side of the transport ship. It stabilized its grip before slamming its tentacles against the exterior. Fortunately, the octopus was scared off when firepower was used, and the ship was rescued with no casualties. This is a major flaw in our monitoring of marine life, Stephen said sternly. Do we need to increase the investment, or is there a technical issue? The same situation couldn't happen a second time. Mirage Island was irreplaceable to the country. The radar system used for reconnaissance submarines and warships is useful, but most marine creatures don't have metallic structures. It's difficult to lock on to their locations.
Do you have a solution?
We could try catching the octopus and analyzing its mutation, one of the officers suggested. This was only a technical plan. The specifics would be handed over to the Research Institute. There were only 2 reasons for the sudden appearance of mutated marine life. The first was that the foreign hostile forces had secretly released them into the ocean. The second was that the waters around Mirage Island were contaminated. To confirm the reason, they'd have to wait until the octopus was captured and analyzed. In the evening, Tina and Cade were scrolling through their phones, searching for a particular news article. They set down their phones at the same time and looked at each other. "Did something go wrong?" Tina asked. "I doubt it," Cade said. "The drug we used is past the trial stages. The Sovereign is probably limiting the news to prevent panic." The senior executives of Silver Shield Corporation had gotten impatient after making no progress on their investigation with Dr. Dalton's family. They'd released the mutated octopus from their island in the Pacific Ocean and lured it to Mirage Island. They didn't know if Dr. Dalton was on any of the ships, so they decided to test the octopus on a random ship before making an official move. To prevent further accidents, the officers responsible for the maritime defense asked the researchers of Mirage Island to stay in Annapolis temporarily and work at the military's Underground Research Institute. After the meeting, Stephen met up with Dr. Dalton. "What do you make of the mutated sea creature?" "I can guarantee that the waters around Mirage Island are not contaminated. Those officers from Maritime Defense don't know what they're talking about." "I'm not here to find fault with you. I just wanted to ask for your opinion." Dr. Dalton was defensive, but he relaxed when Stephen didn't make any baseless accusations. "It's been some time since Amber and Mitty returned to Warhawk. They've gone back to the lab to continue their research. The chip didn't send back any relevant information. It's unlikely that the mutated sea creature has anything to do with Warhawk." They were at a dead end, and the appointed time was about to arrive. Stephen had to focus on the tribulation sect. He left the Underground Research Institute and drove to the training grounds. Stephen found Tristan in the garden. He was drunk with a bottle of wine in his hand and humming to himself. "When did you become a musician? Have you decided where to set up the trap? We don't know how many of them will show up." Tristan shook his head to clear his mind from the alcohol. "You know what they say, when the soldiers come, the water will block them. When the water comes, the earth will block the waves. The tribulation sect is ancient, but they don't have much going for them. You have the Leviathan unit and the palace on your side. Your martial arts are as numerous as the clouds. What are you worried about?" Tristan acknowledged the martial arts of the Leviathan unit's leader after witnessing his mysterious scroll in action. He wasn't weak by any means. The Leviathan unit's leader was watching over Stephen. After some time passed, he finally opened his eyes. "Mr. Adams, you look a little tired. Do you want to go back and take a break?" "No, I can't leave. The tribulation sect will be here any minute." "I've asked the Leviathan unit to surround the area and hide themselves. They won't be able to escape." Tristan's tower was hidden right below the platform. Once the tribulation sect was within range, the spatial teleportation array would be activated. The true battlefield wasn't this barren wasteland. It was a snowy mountain peak. The Cloud Crest Manor was built by an ancient faction. Their heritage had ceased after the war during the ancient times, but the traps that their deceased martial artists set up were still in place. The country of Cadus was connected to the eastern border of the U.S. One could directly travel to the other party's territory from the port. After the chaos at the northern border was settled, Cadus became an important international trade zone. Silver Shield Corporation's headquarters were located at the center of a bustling metropolis along the coast of Cadus. The 3 big bosses behind the scenes, Zorvis, Juno, and Mike, were sitting in the office on the top floor. Glass windows spanned the room, reflecting the beautiful scenery of the ocean. "The Sovereign is always one step ahead," Zorvis said. "The executives we sent can't handle him." Mike was indifferent. "He holds the power of the U.S. in his hands. Forget about the Silver Shield Corporation. Not even the 9 States Financial Group can compete with them. This was to be expected." The 9 States Financial Group was a multinational investment company, and the 3 of them had invested a large amount of money into it. They didn't interfere with the specific operations of the business because they were searching for a way to achieve eternal life and enjoy the wealth and power forever. Whether it was biochemical technology, genetic technology, conventional medical technology, or anything that was useful to the human body, they had to have it. This research used to be carried out on the island in the Pacific Ocean before the Institute was destroyed. The real question is, what did the sovereign learn from the ancient texts, and how are we going to pry the information from him? Take it from him by force, of course, Juno said. We can't discuss business with him. He doesn't lack money. Their initial plan was to kidnap Dr. Dalton and his team to use as bargaining chips, but they were heavily protected by the military. Juno turned the laptop around and showed Zorvis and Mike the information on the screen. They'd gathered more than 200 people in the city, and their weapons and equipment were stored in the underground warehouse of the office building. The 9 States Financial Group was doing well in the business industry. They'd spent a lot of money to establish a private team of mercenaries, and their individual capabilities were on par with the Leviathan unit. The 3 of them looked at each other and decisively sent an order to the captain of the mercenaries. He would be sneaking his team, weapons, and equipment across the United States' border by land. The states in the eastern region of the U.S. were currently under martial law. Stephen knew that their enemies were waiting for an opportunity to strike, but he couldn't predict where they would be coming from. For now, his only option was to defend. As night fell, Stephen was still waiting for the tribulation sect to show up at the wasteland. It's getting late. Let's try something else. What do you need us to do, Mr. Adams? The Leviathan unit's leader asked. I can do it myself. Tristan gave me his gems. Stephen held out his hand, and the 7 illusory pearls materialized above his palm, glowing brighter than the bonfires. The gems rotated in the air, releasing a pillar of light that pierced the clouds and lit up the night sky. It was bright enough to attract the attention of everyone who was monitoring the wasteland. The unusual pillar of light would make them question the validity of the rumors and encourage them to act. Tristan sat beside a bonfire and roasted a drumstick. He didn't approve of Stephen playing with his treasures. That's a weapon, not a circus prop. Are you that bored? That was a warm-up exercise before the battle. It's much better than spending my time eating and drinking. Stephen was somewhat concerned for Tristan's health. It hadn't been that long since he transferred to a new body. Most martial artists understood the importance of restraint to maintain a serene state of mind, but Tristan was the exact opposite. The sound of a wind chime echoed through the night. The Leviathan unit was on high alert. They'd set up a detection array around the platform. If an unknown martial artist trespassed, the wind chime hanging from the tree would ring. The mercenary team from the 9 Stars Financial Group had arrived. As the saying goes, money makes the devil push the mill. Their goal was to get rid of the target in the shortest amount of time possible, in exchange for a reward from their superiors. In other words, their ambitions were completely different from the tribulation sect. Mr. Adams, be careful, the Leviathan unit's leader warned. I'm going into the forest to give instructions. Okay, scope out the enemy. If they're not that strong, let me deal with them. Understood. The Leviathan unit's leader dashed into the forest, while Stephen and Tristan hid below the platform. The actors who'd performed a fake ritual had been relocated elsewhere several hours ago. The platform and its vicinity were currently empty. The captain of the mercenary team gave his orders through a walkie-talkie. Did you find the target? I haven't seen a single person. We're close to the platform, his subordinate reported. There are bonfires, but no one's around. Is this information reliable? Maybe the sovereign and his people went back to the city after that weird ceremony. The mercenaries had come too far to turn back now. It'd be a wasted trip if they returned empty-handed. Target the platform. Something might be inside. His team raised their guns and fired. The dense bullets pierced the wooden structure of the platform. It was a construct built for temporary purposes, so it wasn't that sturdy. Stephen and Tristan pressed themselves against the ground. They were almost buried by the broken wooden planks. Stephen was suspicious about the assailants' identities. When did the tribulation sect start using modern weapons? It doesn't fit their fighting style. Tristan scowled at him. Is your brain made of rocks? Infuse your inner energy into the illusory pearls. I gave them to you out of the goodness of my heart, but you're not even using them. Tristan had decided to give Stephen one of his precious treasures, but he didn't seem interested. Stephen had barely glanced at the 7 gems before putting them away. Stephen materialized the gems and did as Tristan instructed. They connected to his optical nerves, substituting for his eyes. The gems floated into the air above the platform, giving him a full view of the situation on the ground. Mr. Tristan, your gift is surprisingly useful. What other features does it have? Figure it out for yourself. I've never met someone as lazy as you. Where are you getting the nerve to criticize me? We're technically evenly matched. The assailants were dressed in the same uniform, and they were wearing a conspicuous bulletproof vest. The firearms in their hands were standard. The Tribulation sect was a faction of martial artists. Martial arts were valued around the world, and it should have been easy for them to amass a certain amount of wealth over the years. However, their gear and weapons weren't that expensive. They were probably a mercenary group. Stephen crawled out from under the broken platform. Is money more important than your own lives? This is a dangerous place, and it's not worth the risk. The captain's eyes lit up when they saw him. That's the target. Capture him alive. Bullets won't kill him. Avoid his vitals and break his limbs. A barrage of bullets rained down on Stephen. He dashed across the clearing, leaving after images behind. The mercenaries couldn't keep track of his location, so they shot wildly in every direction. Stephen used his inner energy to control the 7 gems remotely. They fell from the sky, more radiant and dazzling than a meteor shower as they crashed into the ground. The sound of bones shattering filled the air. The uninjured mercenaries turned serious as their teammates fell. They tossed their firearms that were out of ammunition to the side and pulled out their swords. The captain took the lead and rushed at Stephen with his sword raised. He still had hope that they would complete the mission. The Sovereign didn't have any bodyguards with him. His team would be strong enough to stand up to him. Just as the captain's sword came down on Stephen's shoulder, he sidestepped and dodged. The gems soared into the sky and rained down on the mercenaries again. When their weapons deflected the illusory pearls, the gems were sent flying back. But within a few seconds, they would adjust their positions and aim for them again. The captain swung his sword at an even faster speed. When we capture you alive, you'll start begging for death. That's not happening. Those who rely on guns and weapons don't have any real skill. Stephen caught the blade between his hands and shattered the sword. Before the captain could react, Stephen raised his hand, and the broken pieces of the sword pierced through him. His lifeless body collapsed in a heap. Stephen went on to take care of the rest of the mercenaries. They weren't as fast as the gems. The chase was short, and soon there was no one left. Seeing that the battle was over, Tristan crawled out from under the platform to scavenge the battlefield. He lifted his hand, thoroughly searching the corpses with his inner energy. They don't have anything of value on them. What a waste of time. What's so strange about that? Stephen said. They're hired mercenaries. They kill for money. He set the bodies on fire with his blue flames. The flames burned their clothes and skin, but it didn't turn them to ashes. He would leave them there to distract the Tribulation sect when they arrived. It was late into the night, and Tristan was reaching the end of his patience. How much longer do we have to wait? You should have just booked plane tickets for them. Be patient. Maybe our fight just now alerted them. The two of them hid in the bushes to wait some more. Thousands of miles away, in Cadus's metropolis, the 3 bosses of Silver Shield Corporation, Zorvis, Juno, and Mike, were in disbelief by the data displayed on their screen. Their mercenaries had sensors on them to keep track of their status. The sensors detected their heartbeat, pulse, and body temperature and sent the data back to their laptop. The vitals started fluctuating 10 minutes ago, and now they'd all been reduced to 0. The mercenaries that the 9 States Financial Group painstakingly developed had been completely annihilated. How did they die so fast? Did some explosion take them out? Don't underestimate the Sovereign's martial artists. Let's come up with a new plan. Do we have time for that? The Sovereign won't be staying at that wasteland for long. He'll leave once the ceremony's over. If we mobilize our other people, they'll be intercepted at the border. three bosses of Silver Shield Corporation came to a unanimous conclusion. The only people they could rely on were Tina and Cade, but they weren't confident the two of them could pull off the mission. Tina and Cade could use their identity as investors to pick up where the mercenaries left off, but it was unlikely that they would succeed. Juno was hesitant. Is it really a good idea to send a company executive, her assistant, and a small group of martial artists to deal with the Sovereign? Zorvis was firmly opposed. Their mission is to steal Dr. Dalton's research. This concerns the development of Silver Shield Corporation's new business. Don't forget how much money they used to build the factory in the U.S. If their intentions are exposed, their efforts will be in vain. Even if that was true, the three of them didn't want to give up. The temptation of a miraculous ancient text was something they couldn't resist. After thinking about it, they set their sights on the other side of the Verglis Strait. Warhawk was only one body of water away. They called the head secretary of Warhawk's parliament, Hillskin. Old friend, it's been a long time since your country's made a move. Are you surrendering? Are the three of you calling me this late at night just to mock me? Of course not. We have something serious to discuss. How many people can you mobilize? Hillskin was an old acquaintance of the 9 States Financial Group. Their sponsorship had helped some of the representatives of Warhawk's parliament snag their positions. Their cooperation ran deep. The Sovereign is a tough nut to crack, Hillskin said. How are you planning to go against him? Are you afraid? We didn't realize Warhawk's strength declined this much. Don't get smart with me. Our recent operations were failed. The Parliament is tense right now. Hillskin wasn't exaggerating. When Harris and Brent returned in defeat, the head senator, Merrill, had become more conservative in her tactics. Warhawk needed to lay low until they returned to their peak. Are you really not tempted? Juno asked. The secrets of the world are right in front of us. A mere country is nothing. His attempt at persuasion didn't have much of an effect. In the end, Hillskin only agreed to send some people from a security company to Warhawk to assist. Investigations were the main focus, and battles were supplementary. It was best not to have any conflict with the Sovereign or his people. It was well past midnight in the barren wasteland. The forest was quiet. Not even the sound of animals scampering could be heard. The silence was unnerving, and Stephen realized that something was amiss. He notified everyone else that the tribulation sect was coming before using the same trick as before. The 7 gems hovered in the air to give him a bird's-eye view of the clearing below. The cardinal, Sermiel, had abandoned the carriage and was riding on the back of the saber-toothed tiger through the forest. The remaining members of his team were slightly slower, but they were all heading towards the light up ahead. The platform was riddled with holes and falling apart from the last attack, but the bonfire was burning brightly. The Leviathan unit's leader gave the subordinates around him their instructions. Hide while the tribulation sect gets close to the platform, and wait for Mr. Adams' signal before launching an attack. Prioritize your safety. Don't sustain any injuries if you can't help it. His subordinates didn't quite understand. Boss, we're not cowards. If we don't fight with our full strength, it won't be easy to restrain them. The Leviathan unit's leader glared at them and pointed in the direction of the platform. Have you forgotten? This isn't the real battlefield. The real battle will begin on the mountain. That's when we'll fight to the death. A few minutes later, the saber-toothed tiger caught scent of a burnt corpse. Sermiel and his team cautiously made their way to the center of the open space to inspect the bodies. They're burnt to a crisp, one of them said. We can't confirm their identities. Maybe the Sovereign is among them. Sermiel didn't jump to conclusions. Whether the Sovereign was alive or dead, nothing was confirmed until his body was found. Sermiel couldn't return to the snowy plains unless he was 100% sure of his answer. Despite the corpses littering the ground, he suspected that the Sovereign was alive, which meant that he was hiding nearby. Inform our people in Annapolis to assassinate his wife and daughter. If he doesn't show up, his death will be confirmed. The tribulation sect didn't have anyone in Annapolis. Sermiel's statement was a provocation to lure out the people in hiding. It worked, because Stephen emerged from the forest with his sword in hand. He didn't say a word. The instant he revealed himself, his blade lit up with flames, and he lunged for the man who threatened his family. Sermiel halted the sword with one finger to its tip. You finally showed up. Are you going to give us what we want? If you cooperate, I might consider letting you live. The moment his finger touched the tip of the blade, the fire began to freeze over. Stephen sensed that something wasn't right. He backflipped through the air to put some distance between them. Who are you? I'm Cardinal Sermiel. I came all the way to your country for a certain treasure. As Sermiel made his introduction, Elias couldn't stop himself from grinning. It was satisfying to see how powerless Stephen was in front of a cardinal. Sermiel had stopped his sword in flames with one finger. Tristan walked out of the forest. It's been a long time since I've seen someone at your realm. I guess the Tribulation sect does have some tricks up their sleeve. Sermiel frowned at the unfamiliar young man standing next to Stephen. He didn't recognize him, but he could feel his aura. It was similar to Stephen's. That made things easier. If they took down the young man, they could use him to threaten Stephen. Everything was simpler with a hostage. Your cultivation isn't bad. I'll let you be my tiger's dinner. Tristan smirked. People who talk big usually die the fastest. Are you an exception? He charged at the saber-toothed tiger. Avoiding sharp teeth and attacking the underbelly was the basics in subduing a wild beast. The tiger opened its mouth, spitting out a golden shockwave. It missed Tristan by a hair and exploded on the ground next to him. Stephen was surprised that a medium-sized beast could be this destructive, but he didn't have time to dwell on the details. The others in black robes were rushing toward him. A circle of talismans surrounded him, keeping him in place. Elias was the most excited of them all. Let's settle the score right here, right now. You should have thought twice before provoking the Tribulation sect. You're just a loser relying on your faction, Stephen said. Is everyone in the Tribulation sect thick-skinned like you? You're as eloquent as ever. You're the sovereign. Crude words like those don't suit you. The circle of talismans shrank. Stephen used the 7 gems to create an opening. When they hit the talismans, the rebounding force was evenly transmitted to each gem. They moved from one talisman to the other. Shortly after the battle began, Elias realized that Stephen had improved since their last encounter. Did you use Warhawk's biochemical technology on yourself? If not, then how did you increase your cultivation by this much in such a short amount of time? Stephen swung his sword at Elias's throat. You're short-sighted. Didn't you know that there's always someone stronger than you? To prevent unnecessary injuries, Elias had placed a talisman on his chest before the battle began. The amplification effect increased his strength at a rapid rate, and he steadily advanced from the initial stages of the immortal realm to the intermediate stages. His fellow faction members had done the same. Dying to an ultimate martial arts technique could be considered preserving your dignity, Elias mocked. Before tonight ends, the U.S. will have a change in leadership. Elias and his team made no move to dodge Stephen's sword. They launched a counterattack using their fists. When they clashed, a metallic sound rang out. The talismans had the ability to fuse themselves into their bodies and transform their skin and bones into metal. Stephen's sword was sharp, but the most it could do was leave scratches on their fists. He was forced to change his attack strategy. Stephen circulated the aura contained in the Killen's core and enveloped his body in golden flames. Whether you've turned into metal or not, you'll be burnt either way. Elias doubted his claims. This temperature is nothing. They both struck with their fists at the same time. When they clashed, neither of them backed down. They began to circulate their inner energy to crush each other. The flames crept up Elias's arms. It was several hundred degrees Fahrenheit, but his robe remained intact. When Elias's team rushed forward to take advantage of their deadlock to grab Stephen, the gems circled around him and shot out randomly. Their bodies were strengthened from the talismans, but they were still knocked back when the gems crashed into them. Tristan and Sermiel's battle was progressing in the same direction. Neither of them had made any progress. Sermiel's scarlet robe fluttered in the wind, deflecting Tristan's attacks. You can't get past my defenses. Get lost before you're buried with the Sovereign. In truth, Sermiel didn't know what to make of Tristan's martial arts. They were unusual and unpredictable. He was as slippery as a loach. Ordinary techniques didn't work on him. Tristan sneered and manifested a massive beast without a word. It lunged for Sermiel with a howl. Sermiel's talisman was swept aside, leaving him defenseless. He clutched his robe. It expanded to a size that paralleled Tristan's phantom. The beast grabbed the robe, and they were stuck in a tug-of-war. Sermiel tore his robe out of the beast's grasp and drew his sword. His strikes were fast and deadly. They curved in different directions, making it hard to predict which angle the strike would come from. Tristan had to rely on his speed to catch Sermiel off guard. The Leviathan unit hiding in the forest watched the two battles with their hearts in their throats. They waited and waited some more, but Stephen never gave the signal for them to attack. One member couldn't wait anymore. "Boss, let's just kill our way over." "What are you panicking about?" the leader of the Leviathan unit said. "Can't you see his three guardians calmly keeping themselves hidden? If Mr. Adams really was in danger, they would have jumped out by now." He'd been observing Stephen's every move. He was engaged in a heated battle, but the number of times their attacks landed was far in between, and it didn't cause any substantial damage. As Stephen grappled with Elias, the 7 gems hovered around him, deflecting talismans and preventing the rest of the Tribulation Sect members from coming closer. It wasn't necessary for him to engage in close combat with them. The gems did the work for him. It was satisfying to watch them stagger from the corner of his eye. Tristan had more or less grasped the situation on the battlefield. He had an objective evaluation of the Tribulation Sect. He used his phantom to pull Sermiel's team towards the platform. Stephen coordinated with Tristan. The flames on his body burned brighter and hotter. The talismans resisted the heat, but the burst of light made Sermiel's team pause and look over. Just as they were distracted, a red robe fell from the sky, enveloping them within. This was a weapon that Sermiel had created and perfected over the years. It was impenetrable. He gave Tristan a disdainful look. Using sneak attacks to gain the advantage? Tristan laughed. "I'm not an upright person to begin with." "You're not the only one with these techniques." Sermiel infused his inner energy into his robe to destroy Tristan's phantom. While he was preoccupied, Tristan ran to Stephen's side. The platform exploded. Wooden fragments flew in every direction. The tower appeared at the center of the crater. Sermiel wasn't fast enough, and Tristan's phantom stuffed his team into the door of the tower, where a whirlpool of light came to life. "If you want information on the sacred manual, then follow me," Stephen said. "We'll take you to the real battlefield." This was obviously a trap, but Sermiel didn't have a choice. He couldn't return empty-handed. He was a cardinal, and he wouldn't be exempt from punishment. None of his team members had been killed. If he went after them, he might have a chance to save them. Stephen and Tristan had already entered the tower through the whirlpool. Sermiel made up his mind and followed closely behind. Silence fell over the wasteland. The leader of the Leviathan unit, his subordinates, and the 3 guardians emerged from the forest. The battle had officially begun. They had the advantage in numbers, but it didn't mean anything in a harsh environment. The Leviathan unit's leader addressed the group. "To ensure the safety of Annapolis and the Sovereign's family, we'll be splitting up. The Northern Guardian and I will lead a team of 10 members and chase after them. The Western and Eastern Guardians will be coming with us. Salim, Jace, take everyone else back to the city to protect the Sovereign's family." When their surroundings stopped spinning after entering the tower, everyone found themselves at the peak of a snowy mountain. The chilly breeze cleared their minds. Clouds floated around the side of the mountain. That part alone was proof of how high up they were. Up ahead was a manor with a unique design. The edges of the walls, roof, and pillars were rounded rather than sharp. It looked more like an avant-garde design in contemporary times, instead of an ancient building constructed thousands of years ago. "The ancient martial arts factions are nearby," Tristan whispered. "They'll show up when the battlefield reaches a certain point. Don't do anything crazy if you don't want things to get out of hand." Stephen was quick to agree. The Cloudcrest Manor was emitting an unusual aura. There was no telling what danger was lurking inside. Tristan's phantom had disappeared from the spatial shift, and Sermiel's robe had returned to normal. Stephen's group and the Tribulation Sect eyed each other warily. Before either side could say anything, the sky rippled and a chain shot towards Sermiel. The Leviathan unit's leader went up to Stephen. "We'll deal with them. You should take a break." "Okay, keep an eye on your surroundings." "Understood." Fending off 10 members of the Tribulation sect by himself had drained a considerable amount of Stephen's inner energy and stamina. He stood off to the side, took a medicinal pill, and entered a meditative state. When Sermiel's team deflected the chains with their weapons, it was too sturdy to cut through. The rebound numbed their arms. A strange coffin appeared from the ripple in the sky. Blood seeped from the cracks. Sermiel was knowledgeable and experienced. One glance was all he needed to see how the mechanics behind the leader's scroll. "Are you summoning entities from an alternate dimension?" The Leviathan unit's leader was impressed with Sermiel's analysis. "The array on the scroll is formed from spatial fragments. It activates when it locks onto specific coordinates of an alternate dimension. Ready to surrender yet?" His scroll was a top-grade weapon he'd spent his entire life developing and perfecting. He never expected to come across someone who knew how it worked. "Don't get ahead of yourself. The Tribulation sect has many techniques more powerful than that scroll of yours." With Sermiel's command, his team threw their swords into the air to counter the incoming chains. The Leviathan unit's leader, Ann Noor, led their team into battle. The intensity of the conflict shook the mountain. Ice and snow fell off the cliffs and tumbled into an avalanche. Stephen became increasingly worried. "The entire mountain is shaking. Is this going to trigger the manor's defensive array?" Tristan shrugged. "It's been thousands of years since I've been here. I don't know how much has changed." The battle was underway, and it was too late to stop it now. The only thing they could do was wait for it to play out. Stephen looked up at the coffin in the sky. "Mr. Tristan, you've seen a lot of things in your life. What's a spatial fragment?" Some time ago, the Leviathan unit's leader had offered to give Stephen his scroll as a precaution. Stephen had refused because a martial artist's ultimate technique was their own and shouldn't be handed to someone else so easily. The scroll was mysterious, but he didn't know it was to this extent. Stephen was well-versed in many types of martial arts, but he'd never come across techniques that could alter the laws of time and space. This scroll gave the leader that ability. "The spatial fragments were created from an explosion that tore space and time apart," Tristan explained. "They look like shattered glass lenses. After their creation, they should have been immediately vaporized by the natural laws into an ethereal state to restore the broken space. However, the Leviathan unit's leader took advantage of the high temperature and energy the explosion produced to delay the repair and obtain those fragments for himself. They burn on the scroll like smoldering iron and form complex patterns with mystifying effects." This was an opportunity that the Leviathan unit's leader had stumbled upon by luck, and it would most likely never happen again in his lifetime. While they were discussing the scroll, the battle grew more intense. Sermiel deflected the chains, forcing them back into the coffin. The rain of blood scattered at random intervals, but its corrosive effects weren't enough to destroy the talismans. Noor, Wes, and Aston laced their inner energy with the chill in the air and infused their swords with a freezing aura. With every strike, the temperature around Sermiel dropped drastically. Layers of frost gathered on his red robe. "You're making a fool of yourself with these petty tricks," Sermiel said. "Even if we stood face to face, your weapons would never be able to pierce my defenses." "At your old age, aren't you supposed to be more humble and wise?" Noor shot back. "Don't be too full of yourself," Wes added. "Bragging won't get you anywhere," Aston echoed. When the three guardians rushed at him again, Sermiel threw a talisman onto the snow, generating a magnetic force and extracting the iron sand buried in the frozen earth. The black iron sand condensed into a ball and extended into the shape of a human. 5 iron sand warriors were molded, and they used their bodies to block the incoming attacks. Sand filled their wounds and repaired any damage to their bodies. The Leviathan unit's leader's inner energy couldn't keep up with the coffin's consumption. He drew the scroll with his finger, and the coffin in the sky disappeared. The connection to an alternate dimension required a martial artist's inner energy to maintain. No matter how powerful the summoned entities were, if the connection to an alternate dimension was lost, they would disappear along with it. Elias snickered. "It's only been a few minutes. This is your limit? How disappointing. Hand over the scroll and maybe we'll spare you. Otherwise, don't blame us for being ruthless. Elias's team launched an attack on the leader, and the Leviathan unit's elite members beside him rushed forward for a confrontation. Just as both battles appeared to be at a stalemate, another unexpected situation occurred. There was a disturbance in the ice and snow a short distance away. A group of familiar faces came into view. They were members of ancient martial arts factions. The elder from the Spectre Cemetery and the elder from the Peach Blossom Moor were leading the operation. The two of them strolled leisurely to Stephen's side. Mr. Adams, there's no need to be concerned. They don't have reinforcements. They'll be pushed to the limit the more they fight. It's not wise for them to confront us in an unfamiliar environment. They're too confident in themselves to realize that. Thank you for your help, Stephen said sincerely. We'll have one less threat on our hands once the Tribulation sect is eradicated. Please don't stand on ceremony. This is our duty. Sermiel wasn't expecting the Sovereign to be so prepared. No casualties had occurred yet, so it was time to change tactics. He leaped into the sky above the manor and landed on a pillar. His team retreated to the side. Stephen and the rest watched them nervously. If they destroy the manor, doesn't that mean they'll activate the hidden guards or trigger a defensive array? Stephen asked in a low voice. That might be their plan, the leader of the Leviathan unit whispered back. He wants to turn this battlefield into chaos. Tell your people to keep their eyes peeled. If something goes wrong, we're retreating. They were in a bind, because if they warned Sermiel not to be reckless, he could use their warning against them. Sermiel laughed at their passive reaction. Why aren't you coming after us? Are you just going to stand there and watch? We've been fighting for so long, but we haven't entered the manor to look around. Isn't that a waste? Are you interested in exploring with me? The location and design of the manor were unusual. Sermiel speculated that there were clues to the sacred manual inside. If he couldn't take down the enemy, then he would take what they came here for by force. No trip was wasted. One must always gain something. Stephen could guess what Sermiel was thinking. There are valuables inside, but there's also traps. I'd be grateful if you explored the area before us and set off the traps in advance. Sermiel wasn't deterred. He covered the manor with his inner energy to figure out the situation inside, but he couldn't get through. His energy was obstructed, as if there were a thick cloud of fog surrounding the manor. Your sarcastic remarks can't stop me. Once I tear down the manor, whatever's inside will naturally be revealed. Sermiel threw his sword between the gap in the manor's frame. His inner energy exploded, cracking the exterior and beginning the dismantling process. Tristan shook his head in disapproval. He's out of his mind. Be prepared to run. This is their mess. Don't get caught up in it. Nor, Wes, and Aston stood next to Stephen, casting wary glances around the area. The danger was at every corner. At that moment, a third unexpected situation occurred. The 7 illusory pearls circled violently in the air and crashed into the exterior of the manor. It's not that easy, Hilskin protested. Warhawk isn't run by a dictator. The representatives of our parliament have their own viewpoints. Whenever we make important decisions, we have to conduct a vote. Forget it, Zorvis interrupted. Talking about what could have been is a waste of time. We're planning to kidnap the key members of Dr. Dalton's team. We'll use them as hostages to exchange for what we want. Mirage Island isn't that far from land. Hilskin was surprised by how bold their plan was. Were they going to have their martial artists trespass on Mirage Island equipped with weapons produced by Silver Shield Corporation? If you want in, you'll have to give us a genuine investment, Zorvis added. I can't give you an answer right away, Hilskin said. I need to discuss this with my head senator, Merrill. Then hurry up. Zorvis hung up on Hilskin and gave Tina and Cade their instructions. They were to lie low and proceed according to the United States' rules to prevent leaving evidence behind. They would strike when there was an opportunity. Several days after the bizarre news was broadcasted, some of the United States' neighboring countries changed their foreign policy. Their attitude was friendlier, and they proposed business partnerships. The visa applications for travel were also less strict. This was all thanks to Stephen. He scripted the broadcast and fooled the world. Every now and then, he would visit the Underground Research Institute and check up on Dr. Dalton's research. Dr. Dalton had pushed back his other projects and began a new one. It was imperative that he develop the perfect artificial body in the shortest amount of time. Stephen examined the sealed glass jar filled with nutrient solution. There was a mass of squirming flesh inside. It was the size of a basketball. It was far from a human body. "Don't worry, Mr. Adams," Dr. Dalton said. "The research will take time, but I will complete it. Among the research we obtained from Amber and Mitty is a perfect model of the human genome, derived by Warhawk's supercomputer using large amounts of data. We use that model as our template to catalyze biological samples. The sample you see is undergoing cell division as we speak. Its growth is slow at the beginning, but it'll take off soon in the middle and late stages." Stephen was anxious to get the remnant will out of his head, but he reined in his impatience. "Okay, I'm counting on you." His gaze shifted to the adjacent sealed glass containers. They were filled with strange-looking fish. The researchers explained that they were mutated piranhas. Their most prominent features were their sharp teeth and powerful digestive systems. The mutated octopus hadn't been caught yet, but while they were fishing, they'd found these mutated piranhas. They were a threat to marine life and patrol ships. The ocean was deep, and it was impossible to drain the coastal waters and get rid of the mutated sea creatures. If they studied the mutations, perhaps they could develop a cure. A large iron cage had been placed close to the corner of the wall. Inside was Samuel's saber-toothed tiger. Observation of beasts was valuable research material. When Stephen approached, the tiger roared in his face. He wasn't fazed. "If it doesn't settle down, kill it," he said to no one in particular. "Bones of a tiger can be soaked in wine, and its skin can be made into a comfortable cushion." The saber-toothed tiger was used to human company, and it seemed to have understood Stephen's threat. It circled the cage before lying down dejectedly. Stephen moved his office to a room at the Underground Research Institute. He wanted to monitor the progress of Dr. Dalton's research. The staff from the other departments came to find him to report. "The delegation team we sent to Cadis has returned. Negotiations weren't successful. Cadis isn't interested in a collaboration. Their stance is the same as before the conflict at the northern border." In terms of geographical location, Cadis was one of the closest neighboring countries to the U.S. The United States' market was one of the largest, and there were many countries interested in getting involved. Cadis had the opposite attitude. Were they not interested in money? However, according to several investigations, that wasn't the case, because they received investments from external groups like Warhawk's financial industry, Silver Shield Corporation's factories, and a voyage fishing company that was jointly established with the island state. Whatever the case may be, Cadis was interfering with their overseas trade, and they were refusing to compromise. The staff was prepared for a conflict. "Mr. Adams, as long as you give the order, we can mobilize our forces on the border to persuade them to lift their restrictions." "We can't be that aggressive right off the bat," Stephen said. He was well aware of the difference in strength between their two countries, but he also had to take international public opinion into consideration. Cadis was a neutral country, and conflict would drive them to ally with the United States' enemies. He instructed the staff to keep investigating. Once they had evidence, Cadis would be forced to compromise whether they wanted to or not. Meanwhile, a tense atmosphere was in the air at Crystal Castle of the Tribulation sect. They were in shock after discovering that Samuel's team had been wiped out. There was a lack of information, and they didn't know the details. Augustus mourned for Samuel in his heart. "It's disappointing that a powerful team like theirs failed the mission. Our church has never yielded to difficulties. The sacred mountain is one step away. We need to get our hands on it at all costs." The Cardinals were surprised that Samuel's team had fallen, but it wasn't completely unexpected. Samuel had a talent for stargazing, but he was elderly, and his martial arts fell behind. If the sovereign had made meticulous preparations beforehand, it was understandable that he died on the battlefield. One of the cardinals, Farola, stood up and volunteered to avenge his friend. "It's easy for us to lose the upper hand because we're in enemy territory. I suggest taking control of some of the major families in Annapolis and waiting for an opportunity to take action." Augustus approved of Ferola's plan. He left this task to him and the other cardinals to contact their reinforcements to prepare for conflict. If they worked together to investigate the sacred manual, their chance of success would be much higher. Ferola brought a group of elite members from the faction and disguised themselves before heading to the U.S. Quite a few states were under martial law, so they infiltrated the country through the eastern port. When they were settled, they made their way to Annapolis. At this time, the Underground Research Institute had completed the artificial body with a perfect human genome. "Would you like to implant the AI chip now?" Dr. Dalton asked. Stephen patted his shoulder with a smile. There were some things that went beyond the scope of scientific comprehension. "Why don't you take a break? I'll perform the operation myself." "But the instruments are complicated." "Don't worry about it. Nothing's too complicated for me." Dr. Dalton was confused. He'd never heard of the Sovereign having experience with brain operations. Despite his doubts, he listened to Stephen and went to the lounge to brew a cup of tea. Stephen was the only one left in the room. His freedom was floating in a glass container right in front of him. "Sir, I've prepared the body you asked for. Your new life is waiting for you." "You're more efficient than I gave you credit for, but this isn't the body I was expecting." The remnant will was hoping for the body of a martial artist who'd reached the pinnacle of martial arts. The stronger the body, the higher the cultivation it could handle. "This is the crystallization of a perfect human being. You won't understand this by looking at it from an ancient lens." The remnant will was skeptical, but much to Stephen's relief, he agreed. "All right then." His spiritual energy merged with the body floating in solution, and Stephen was finally free. The remnant will stretched his arms and familiarized himself with his new body. It was much better than living in someone's mind. The remnant will flicked his finger twice, and the sealed container made of bulletproof glass shattered. "Let me formally introduce myself. My name is Zane LaCroix. I'm a true immortal martial artist." Stephen was in disbelief. Above the immortal realm was the red dust immortals and the true immortals. If Zane's cultivation was that profound, how did he end up like this? Zane's tone took an aggressive turn. "When I ascended to the true immortal realm, my enemy ambushed me. My body died, but my mental energy survived. If I ever meet their descendants, I'll cut them to pieces." Stephen was concerned that Zane's anger would destroy the entire Underground Research Institute, so he quickly changed the topic. "Mr. Zane, that's all in the past. The passage of time leaves nothing behind, not your family nor your enemies. Stay in the country and start a new life." When Stephen was sure that Zane wouldn't go berserk and rampage through the streets, he gave him a set of clothes to change into. Once Zane was presentable, he let him out of the room. The staff at the Research Institute was so scared they couldn't speak. Their eyes widened in horror, and their jaws dropped at the sight of the perfect human body walking around without an AI chip in their brain. After Dr. Dalton left the room, the Sovereign had emerged less than 10 minutes later with the body trailing after him. That wasn't enough time for him to implant the chip. What method did he use to bring the body to life? The level of his technology must have transcended the limits of civilization. Dr. Dalton set his cup of tea down with a shaky hand and gathered his courage to ask, "Mr. Adams, how did you bring him to life without the chip?" "Don't ask questions. I have secrets of my own. Destroy all information regarding this body." Fortunately, Dr. Dalton had seen many things during his career as a researcher, and he took this miraculous conundrum in stride. "I understand." After gaining a body, the first thing Zane wanted to do was take revenge. In the vast sea of people, it was impossible to find his enemies and their descendants. The world's population was more than 8 billion. "Mr. Zane, would you like to stay at the training grounds?" Stephen suggested. "You and Tristan are from the same era. Maybe you two can find some common ground." Zane took him up on his offer. The Leviathan unit began to feel nervous again. Putting two old-fashioned martial artists from thousands of years ago who knew nothing about modern technology in the same place was a prelude to disaster. They had no choice but to send more people to keep an eye on them. While this was going on, Harry and Rebecca sealed another important business deal at the Eastern Port. The Silver Shield Corporation secretly supported them with a large amount of funds and established the Maritime Trade Association. It wasn't owned by the government. It was a civil organization formed by maritime companies to determine the price and avoid excessive competition. Harry and Rebecca went to Skyreach Corporation with extravagant gifts in hands to visit Kim. Your cultural media department has been popular recently. You must be busy. We brought you herbal tonics. Kim knew right away that their sincerity was fake. They'd accumulated enough wealth to buy out half of the U.S. Why would they be coming here to visit her? If you have something to say, just say it. My time is valuable. Harry flashed a smile. We've gathered the shipping companies at the Eastern Port and formed an association to promote healthy competition and development of the industry. The opening ceremony will be held in 3 days. I'd like to invite you to participate in the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Kim was more important than any celebrity or entrepreneur. Her presence would add to the Cerulean Shipping Company's reputation, and more importantly, she was free advertisement. Kim had been feeling down lately. It had been some time since she saw Stephen. She agreed to Harry and Rebecca's request and thought of it as a short, relaxing trip to the beach. I'll bring my bodyguards with me. Don't arrange any business meetings. I'll only be making an appearance. Harry and Rebecca readily agreed to her requests and left after respectfully saying their goodbyes. After finishing her work in the evening, Kim grabbed her bag and went downstairs to the lobby. When she exited the building, she saw Stephen leaning against his car, waiting for her. Did you finally remember that you have a family? Stephen held out his arms with a smile. Come here. She ran into his embrace, hugging him tightly. The mutated octopus released a cloud of ink at Stephen and the Leviathan unit. The suction pads on its tentacles were larger than a sink. It was a certain death for any living creature that got stuck. Stephen's sword didn't have much of an effect underwater. There was a risk of his attacks deviating and backfiring from the irregular waves. The mutated octopus was a troublesome opponent. No wonder the staff from the Maritime Defense Department hadn't made any progress after so long. Stephen's sword vanished, and the 7 illusory pearls took its place. They swerved through the water with relative ease. Of all of his weapons, it was met with the least resistance. It was the most suitable for underwater battles. The Leviathan unit members were holding reverse hooks. When the octopus struck with its tentacles, they threw the hooks into its flesh. The more it struggled, the deeper the hooks went. While Stephen was watching from the side, he noticed a flicker of light near the creature's head. The light was as small as a coin, but it was glaring in the darkness of the water. He instructed the Leviathan unit to hold the octopus down while he inspected the strange light. As Stephen swam over, the gems pierced the head, and he plunged his hand into the wound to pull out the glowing object inside. It was a chip, similar to the AI chips that Dr. Dalton and his team had produced in his lab. Stephen guessed that someone was sending instructions to the mutated octopus. Whoever it was had achieved a similar breakthrough to Dr. Dalton's team and was testing it on animals. With the hooks holding the octopus in place, the gems crushed its body. When it was over, Stephen resurfaced with the Leviathan unit and boarded the ship. He took off his oxygen mask and handed the chip to the captain. This is the chip that was controlling the creature. Analyze the communication waves and see if you can find the exact location where the instructions are coming from. The captain and his crew had fished out mutated marine creatures before, but they were much smaller than the octopus. They didn't have chips inside them, which meant that they followed the octopus's commands, because it was the top of the food chain. The underwater camera scoped out the vicinity. The smaller sea creatures had disappeared, most likely because the octopus was dead. This region was the United States' territory. When using satellite waves to communicate, leaving traces behind was inevitable. The captain found the location in less than half an hour. We tracked the signal to a beach near the coast of Cadis's metropolis. Stephen inspected the map on the wall of the ship. The ocean near the eastern port was connected to Cadis's waters. This is why they've been maintaining a neutral stance with the U.S., even though they have a connection with our neighboring countries. Let's go see what else they're doing behind the scenes. The Leviathan unit members came over to warn him. Mr. Adams, they have warships stationed along the coast. They'll target us if we approach their port without permission. Stephen was determined to catch the people behind this. Killing the mutated octopus should have caused a big disturbance among the culprits. If they delayed the operation, it would give them time they needed to destroy the evidence and escape. Sail to the shallow waters near the shore. I'll swim the rest of the way to the port with a small team. The Leviathan unit has members stationed along Cadis's coast. I'll ask them for assistance. At the Silver Shield Corporation's office building, the three bosses had just wrapped up their meeting. Their water processing project, highway construction project, and other large-scale investments were about to begin. Zorvis leaned back in his seat and lit a cigarette. He had a displeased expression on his face. Does Cadis's royal family think we're free money? They want profits, technology, and employment to keep their mouths shut. If it weren't for the opportunity to get rid of the sovereign, who would want to visit a lousy country like the U.S.? Mike sighed. He was also in low spirits because of the astronomical investment. It needed to be done. We can't let Silver Shield Corporation expose themselves now. He gestured to the window. Our private institution has been feeding the fish with biochemical drugs. The three of them peered outside. There was a building similar to a processing plant on the beach in the distance, surrounded by water. It was Silver Shield Corporation's testing site. The drugs developed from the island in the Pacific Ocean were tested here. Their previous plan was to sink the ship that Dr. Dalton's team was on and take them as hostages after a test run. They couldn't pass up the chance to get their hands on the sacred manual or any clues to its whereabouts. To prevent Cadis's royal family from finding fault with them and risk exposing Silver Shield Corporation's intentions, they had to meet their demands and invest in government-sponsored projects. One of their employees rushed into the office. We've lost contact with the chip controlling the mutated octopus. What happened? Was it corroded from the seawater? Or is it out of battery? I don't believe there's any technical issues. Even without instructions from us, the octopus should have brought the other fish back to the testing site by a designated time. None of them have returned, which means that they're either injured or dead. Zorvis, Juno, and Mike had visited the testing site before. They knew how strong these mutated sea creatures were, especially the octopus. Its skin deflected bullets, and any injuries it sustained healed within 10 minutes. The authorities have rejected our request to scout the waters nearby, the employee continued. It's too close to the United States' territory. The three of them decided to visit the testing site to assess the situation for themselves. Sitting in the office wouldn't solve their problems. Meanwhile, Stephen and the Leviathan unit had arrived at the shallow coastal waters. If the ship went any further, they would be discovered by the surveillance system at the port. Stephen took 2 members of the Leviathan unit with him and swam towards the shore. It was rare for the leaders of the country to personally carry out dangerous missions. The sovereign's bold and fearless approach set the U.S. apart from the rest of the world. The waters around Silver Shield Corporation's testing site were no more than 100 feet deep. A fence of special barbed wire containing fish with unusual appearances inside. Stephen led his team around the beach to be on the safe side. The water might have been injected with drugs, and it wasn't a good idea to come in contact with it. They swam to a small forest a short distance away from the testing site. They changed into a dry set of clothes and snuck their way onto the beach, pretending to be tourists wandering around. The Leviathan unit members caught an unusual scent in the air. There's a strange chemical smell. The factory is probably producing prohibited products, Stephen said. Cadis's officials are letting them do whatever they want, which means they're on the same side. The factory at the center of the testing site was branded with Silver Shield Corporation's logo. It was late at night, but there were still researchers around. A group of them was leading 3 elderly men across the beach and pointing into the water. Stephen didn't recognize them, but they gave off an air of superiority. The 3 leaders of the 9 States Financial Group, Zorvis, Juno, and Mike, turned down requests for interviews, refused to make public statements, and refrained from using social media accounts. They blended into the crowd, keeping their identities so well hidden that even the Leviathan unit's intelligence network didn't have any information on them. Are we going to collect concrete evidence and pressure Cadis's royal family? No, Stephen said. We are getting rid of this place tonight. Silver Shield Corporation was conspiring with Cadis's government. This wouldn't be enough evidence to threaten them. The Leviathan unit members protested. That's too risky, Mr. Adams. They're storing biochemical drugs on the beach. We don't know what effects they have on the human body. Why don't you let us two handle it? If it were up to them, they would have dragged Stephen out of Cadis immediately. But he was stubborn and persistent. He wouldn't be taking one step out of this country until he saw through this to the end. Stephen decisively stated that he would take care of it, putting an end to their discussion. The three of them quietly approached the factory and eavesdropped on the conversation inside. A researcher gestured to a computer analyzing the chip. There were no problems with it before they lost contact. We've confirmed that the chip was destroyed by an external force. Merchant ships from the U.S. aren't capable of that. It must have been one of their warships. Continuing with the operation isn't a good idea. The researchers and their assistants were worried because if something happened, the three bosses would leave and have them deal with the aftermath. They might even be used as scapegoats to appease the U.S. This had been done many times before. Ever since our attack on the military transport ship failed, the entire eastern region of the U.S. has been under martial law, Juno said. Dr. Dalton's team won't be returning to Mirage Island for some time, but waiting isn't a solution. Their plans had to be put on hold for now, but they could work on their second goal instead. They would continue to suppress the United States' overseas trade, increasing their losses and putting their profits in Cerulean Shipping Company's hands. The three of them went out to the beach with the researchers. The mutated fish jumped out of the water, baring their teeth. Their razor-sharp teeth glinted in the moonlight. It would take them seconds to tear off a human limb once they attached on. An assistant operated a mechanical arm. He grabbed a handful of the fish and tossed them outside the barbed wire. When the sun rises, they'll swim to the eastern port of the U.S. and attack the ships that come and go. The three bosses nodded in satisfaction. Their inspection didn't last long. Soon, the factory's lights were turned off, and the silence of the night was restored. The security guards returned to their posts on land. After everyone left the beach, Stephen and his team scaled the wall and leaped into the factory from the security camera's blind spot. There were rows of metal containers 30 feet high in the room. They inspected the pressure gauge on the outside of the containers and were certain that they were filled with biochemical drugs. Ammonium nitrate, acetylene, iron lithium solution, and fuel for the ships was stored in the same room. Having so many flammable liquids stored together gave them an excellent opportunity. If an accident occurred on the beach, the seawater would rapidly extinguish the flames. "Let's search the lab," Stephen instructed. "We'll detonate the containers when we leave." The three of the team members expertly slipped past the security cameras as they went into each room through the doors and windows. For a company like Silver Shield Corporation, their security system was top-notch. They could get caught if they were careless.